again, the science is very clear. It kind of comes down to their voice and the different aspects that they're doing with their voice, and of course their body language. So between really good voice and really good body language, you can have anybody perceive you to be passionate. And so that's really key. So engaging people, being passionate, and then finally, I think the third thing has to be a really good structure. So if you structure your talk in a particular way, you start with that really attention-grabbing opener, that engaging, the way that you want to start, the way that you want to carry on. And so you need to set the audience up from the very, very beginning. Really clear structure. And I think that's just the recipe to a brilliant TED Talk, or in fact, any keynote speech. So, I think actually across all cultures, a good talk, a passionate sounding talk, is pretty well received. Now, of course, there are intricacies, but I think on the whole, if you're doing a really, really good talk, and if I can refer to TED Talks, there are certain talks, there's certain fundamentals, for example, the use of humor when engaging your audience. Humor, I mean, again, how dangerous can you get to try and use humor? But of course, there are certain rules to humor that work everywhere. It's self-deprecating humor is usually appreciated better than making fun of an audience member, for example. So those types of things can be used. They're widely accepted across cultures. Everybody loves to laugh. So why not use it? When you look at the really good TED Talks, the most widely viewed TED Talks around the world are humorous, engaging, and passionate TED Talks. There is certainly a lot of intricacies. There definitely are cultural barriers, but I would suggest that anybody coming from North America, Western Europe, Eastern Asia, I think at the end of the day, just the recipe of a good talk is going to be the same.
And what do you look for now with your team when it comes to bringing new speakers into your TEDx events?
So I always go for the idea first. So in fact, what we do, the team kind of get together and we say, okay, here in Luxembourg, what's happening at the moment? What is everybody interested in? And we try and focus on the local market. But of course, at the end of the day, AI is a global phenomenon. So we're desperately looking for people that have a new take on different areas of AI, for example. And then we go and find the speaker. But typically what we'll do is we'll go and find the best qualified person to come and talk about it. So very frequently we'll go to the University of Luxembourg and go and ask. And typically researchers aren't necessarily the most reputable in being passionate and engaging on stage. But so that's what we'll then do. We'll do everything we can to make sure that as long as they're willing to take the feedback, proactively take that feedback and do something about it, we'll work with them and make sure that it just comes across really well on a TED stage.
What did you learn about developing a mindset of spontaneity in those early days of developing a successful band that could teach us to bring it into our lives today, whether it's work or at home?
Well, I think if there's any word that sticks out, it's authenticity, because if you're authentic, people will forgive you every mistake. You see it on chat shows all the time. People say, can you do that thing that you do? And they try it and they get it wrong. And then people go, hooray, they got it wrong, or they try an accent and it goes a bit wild, or they swear by accident or something. Hooray, don't worry, we'll bleep that out. So it's, people love authenticity because they feel it, and it reminds them of vulnerability, the vulnerability they feel that they're scared of expressing. Here's someone. So we learned that in our making songs up on stage, we learned that as long as, like I say, the important thing that I learned from that was you get the same applause, whether it goes well or not. What you get applauded for.
Now, on the topic of authenticity, I'd like to switch gears here, and I'd like to ask you to write down the following 2 sentences on the paper that you have in front of you.
Okay.
And if you print, you can print. If you do cursive old school, you can do that too, ideally both. I'm going to talk you through this. We'll take about 30 seconds on air to do this. Now, I ask though that particular sentence to be written out because that has a certain number of letter formations or strokes. And as a handwriting expert, I can see about 100 different personality combinations that exist through your strokes on the page, which is how we usually begin or end signature leadership, because your signature is like a sign of nature. Your signature is your authority in the world. So what I'm going to, and one more thing, Gair, can you sign your name underneath?
Okay.
Just sign your name. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring up a few things. Gair can tell me if it's accurate or not, and then we can expand on that. And I'm going to give myself, that's perfect, about 10 seconds to look it over. So if you can just hold it up a bit.
I'm just trying to get it into the I love this, Jamie, because this is so like our whole conversation, so unrehearsed, unscripted.
Yes.
Two guys just flipped on the cameras, pressed record, not knowing exactly where this was going to go.
That's true. It absolutely is true. So a few things I'm seeing about you are, well, first of all, you have this extraordinary energy. Though I'll tell you how as we're going, although sometimes I might just get right to the point. The large, and you can look at this, flip back and forth and look at this so you're seeing what I'm seeing. You have very large letters in your signature. That's your authority in the world. That's your personal brand. That's what you show other people. And so that's more of the extrovert. You gain energy from people. You love being around people. And there's a vitality. There's a dynamic, forward-looking force. I would also argue that that is resilience. It's when you get pushed down, there's this self-confidence, there's this inner drive, just a little bit of ego in a healthy way, that you know that ultimately you are going to win if you keep in the game. You know you're going to move forward. I've seen thousands of examples. So when I see that upward stroke, that's about 2.5 times the size of the letters underneath, the smaller strokes, that tends to be belief in self, high level of confidence, and healthy ego. Now, there's a few other strokes. I look at, and I'm pausing here for a moment because it's a little small from where I'm sitting. So usually I might look really close, but I'm leaning in. We're doing this live, so that's okay. And it's a little bit fuzzy on Zoom, but no problem. So there's a few other things about you is a high level of integrity in your actual writing. So when you have very clear O's, like on 2 on the second line, those clear O's represent someone who walks their talk, someone who, when you're not looking, that's where character shows, right?
Okay.
So character is who you are when no one's looking. And I see those really clear O's. So I see this large dynamic personality. You also have on let me see here. Yeah, so the O's, you also press deeply. So when you write, your hand is really pushing hard on the page. That could be energy.
Yeah.
That also is layers of emotion. So you don't always show people who you don't know your full self. It takes you time to trust because we don't really see what your signature is. So sometimes you're more comfortable showing people this dynamic, confident energy, yet they're not going to see the full you until you trust them, until you feel that you can fully open up to them. You're not going to be dishonest because you're by nature an honest person. You just might not show everything up front. And that is because of life. Life throws challenges at us, and sometimes our deep emotions protect us so that we don't show everything right away, because it could be exhausting. And frankly, we don't need to show everybody everything right away. And I would say to you, you're someone who forgives, but doesn't always forget if you've been wronged. And so there's that. You are trusting. When people gain your trust, they have a friend for life. Also, if people cross paths with you and you feel that they've done you wrong, or they feel that they haven't respected you, that confidence will not need them to be in your life anymore. So someone who has a high degree of self-confidence, you forgive, you don't always forget, and you feel emotions. So your emotions are still layers run deep. So you'll remember something that happened 30 years ago as if it happened today, both the good and the not so good.
Right.
And that is a curse. And it sometimes can be a blessing, because people, when you're around them, that level of confidence with the large letters, you're pressing so deeply, is that emotional depth. Everybody who knows you probably feels a connection to you, because when you're in a room, they feel like they're $1,000,000 because you make them feel special. You make them feel like Benjamin Disraeli, the former prime minister, went on a date. And the date said about the prime minister, they said, what is it about him that's so unique? And she said, well, I was out with another very powerful man in England. And that man, I thought he was the most interesting man in England. When I was out with Benjamin Disraeli, he made me feel like the most interesting person. Wow. And that's what you do, my friend, with the confidence, with your depth, with your dynamic energy. You make whoever you're in the room with feel like a big little legend.
Well, your two things. Number one, my mother, God rest her soul, is once again incredibly bursting with pride, but also this is why signature leadership is so much about what you do, Jamie. The word signature is the word you own, because that's what we all share that in common. And you can, I just can't believe how much you can pull in terms of actual insight that's true based on someone's handwriting. That just, to me, is that's way more than just shall we say, a magic trick. That's a real gift.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, really. That's incredible that you can even to the letter O. Now I'm going to be all self-conscious about my letter O's. And yeah. Told
Yes.
you and your purple people leader friend to take that silly monkey back to the darn zoo.
And we know each other so well. So part of this is, if I do know someone, it's coming at it from perspectives that maybe we haven't talked about so much before. Like, right, your emotional depth has never come up before. Never. And I wanted to make sure that I pick on things that are.
Yeah. Now unique. I feel all exposed on this particular podcast.
The vulnerability.
Oh yeah. It's Brene Brown vulnerability, running back to those purple people eaters, which as a kid growing up, to me, that will always be the Minnesota Vikings defensive line of Jim Marshall, Carl Eller, and Alan Page.
Absolutely. I'd love to end this, Gair, just as we've woven in stories, because a significant part of your big little legend is uncovering these stories. And your own story is one of legend within the industry that we're both in. In speaking, consulting, creating sessions for small to mid-sized businesses globally. I want to ask you about someone who had a significant impact on your authentic swing, and that's your dad. Can we end on telling the story of your father's big little legend and how it's impacted who you are today?